I'm in my shape editing drawing, and what I'd like to do is modify the shape of this existing floor. Right now, this is a flat floor, and if I select on this floor, we'll see that it's 3 inches of lightweight concrete on 2 inches of metal deck. The kind of shape editing that I would like to do is put a floor drain right here in the middle of the floor. I'm going to actually put in 2 floor drains. And by the way, this also works with your roof items. So if you ever need to slope a roof to a roof drain, this technique will work as well. From here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select on the roof, and then we can see that this says shape editing on the ribbon. The first thing I'd like to do is add what's called a split line. You'll recall that I said what I want to do is add 2 different floor drains. And as a result of that, what I'd like to do is slope one side of my floor to one floor drain and slope the other side of my floor to the other floor drain. How we control which one is sloping to the floor drains is by using this split line tool. So I'm going to click once, draw straight over, and then click again. So now I have a split line going right down the middle. I'm going to hit escape a couple times on the keyboard just to get out of the split line command. Then I'm going to select back on my floor, and now I want to add a point. If I click on add a point, I can now move down here. Here on the options bar, there's 2 different things that we need to be aware of. One is called elevation. Now, this elevation can be a negative number, and in fact, in this case, that's what we want, because we want this floor to slope down to that drain. So in this case, I'm going to call this -1 inch. It also says relative, and what relative means, relative to the spot that we picked. Now, that's not necessarily what I want. Even though it technically would work in this condition, if I had 2 or 3 spots picked and they were all relative to one another, then this wouldn't actually end up being -1 inch. It should be -1 inch relative to all the other points that were placed here on the floor. Clear out the check mark next to relative, and now I'm just going to kind of eyeball this and just put it roughly right here in the middle. And we can see that we now have a point that's sloping down to right there. And if we had a actual floor drain family, we could then place it right in that location. For the purposes of this exercise, though, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to place yet another one of these over here toward the side. Click right there. And now I'm going to hit escape a couple of times to get out of the command. Now you can see that I've already placed in here some sections. And if we double click on this upper section here, as we zoom in close, we can see it slopes down to here. It also slopes down to here. Do the same thing over here. We can see it's sloping down in both of those different locations. I'm going to zoom back out again. And the next thing I want to do is move down to the detail level and change this to a fine level of detail. By changing it to a fine level of detail, we'll be able to see everything that's going on. Now, there's one bad thing that's happening here, and that's that the entire floor is sloping down, which means even the structural element is kind of bowing there in the middle in order to keep the thickness of the floor. Usually we wouldn't want to do that. You wouldn't want your structural elements to be bowing like this. There's a setting that we can do inside of the floor that will alleviate this issue. If we select on the floor, go into Edit Type, and then move up here to Edit Structure, there's an option here that says Variable. And I'm going to give a variable thickness to the lightweight concrete floor. Click on OK to that, and then OK to that. Suddenly the structure is now flat, but there's a variable thickness to the lightweight concrete. So now the concrete is sloping down to this point here, which is 1 inch lower than this point. Yet the actual structural part, the actual steel pan that all this concrete is poured into, is still going straight and it's nice and structurally sound. So if we want to slope our floors down toward where we might have a roof drain or any kind of sloping condition, one of the things that we can do is just select on the floor, go into our shape editing tools. If we needed to slope from a specific point, we would then add a split line to it and then make sure that we can add individual points in order to have those floors slope to those locations. One last thing that I want to mention, and that is if we wanted to adjust that slope so it was a little less dramatic or maybe a little bit more dramatic, if we select back on the floor, there's another button here called Modify Sub-Elements. And if you pick on one of those dots, you'll then get the actual reading as to what that elevation is. It'll show up here as well as here. And if you type in a different dimension for it, in this case I'm going to do just a 1/2 inch instead, and then click out here in space, we can see it's now popped itself up. One mistake that I made is I gave it a positive number instead of a negative number. This really needs to be -1 inches, so it's not sloping down. We want it to slope toward the drain, not away from the drain. And we can see it's now sloping toward the drain at -1/2 of an inch. So by using split line, point, and modify sub-elements, you have a great level of control over how your floors, and how even your roofs, can slope toward whatever object you need them to slope toward.